Now I have the honor of introducing Claudia Ford, who has had a career in international women's health and development, spanning 3 decades in all continents. She's a farmer, midwife, artist, writer, teacher, faculty at Rhode Island School of Design in Providence, Rhode Island, and a researcher and teacher in many fields, such as traditional ecological knowledge, historical ethnobotany, gender, medicinal plants, women's health, environmental justice, and many more. She is on the board of directors of the Soul Fire Farm Institute that was already mentioned, and the Orion Society, community that published Orion Literary Magazine, and recently the Biodynamic Association Board. I have been honored to co-work with Claudia and learn from her over the past year, hosting a course in biodynamics at Avena Botanicals, Debsoul's Avena Botanicals in Rockport, Maine. Radically different than any other biodynamic course I've attended or taught at, with Claudia's lead, we not only attempted to explore the mysteries of the biodynamic preps and spiritual science, but also the realities of the social, environmental, and racial issues of our times and of our times in the past. They're woven into the content and inspired many, including myself 100 times over, to deeply not separate issues of justice from agriculture in our consciousness and in our work. And I'm deeply grateful to have met Claudia. Thank you.
Salbona. We are thankful to our mother, the earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us as she has from the beginning of time. This is a part of the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving prayer, and it's only a very small part, because if you know that prayer, which is from the part of the world where I live, the New England, northeast part of the United States, that prayer goes on for hours, sometimes longer. And during that prayer, everything on this earth is thanked. So this is a prayer of profound gratitude. Greetings to all. We are gathered here today, as Chickasaw poet Linda Hogan reminds us, to restore and honor the broken agreements. I begin by acknowledging that this conference is gathered on the traditional territories of the Chinookan people. The ancestors of these groups settled here many millennia in the past. We honor them, the Multnomah, and the other indigenous caretakers of these lands and waters. The elders who lived here before, the indigenous who are here today, and the generations to come. Aho, Ashe. I'd like to acknowledge Rowan White and all those who are battling these climate change-induced fires in California. May Rowan and her family be safe and have great courage. So I prepared this talk this morning. And as we've already seen from some of the other speakers, Thea is nothing if not convincing. So I have to thank Thea for her charming convincing of me to be a substitute for Rowan. I want to thank Orland and Jim. I want to specifically thank Corey who has led me through theosophy, the ag lectures, and now the outline of esoteric science. Thank you, Corey. I want to thank Wally Villa. And I want to thank Chris Bakke, who I met at a conference just not even 2 weeks ago in Vancouver, Canada, called the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference. And I was giving a keynote there on ethnobotany. And yes, it was a conference about entheogens, or psychedelic plants, including cannabis. And it was 4 days after cannabis had been legalized in Canada. So I tell people I was at a conference with 600 stoned Canadians. It was absolutely fabulous. What could be better? I thank all of these people, but any errors in this are mine and due to jet lag. My name is Claudia. I'm the granddaughter of Elsie, Tina, Seth, and John, and I'm the daughter of Vivian and Stanley, and I'm the mother of Juma, Latif, Subotai, and Nolatando. I'm an ethnobotanist, and as you've heard, I'm a midwife, and my 4 children and I spent more than 3 decades outside of North America. The kids went to school in 12 different countries. All of them are on Facebook. You can get in touch with them and ask them if that was child abuse. I speak only for myself today, but I speak from the strength, the hurt, the beauty, and the trauma of my lineage as an African American, mixed race, and cisgender woman. We are spiritual beings becoming into the experience of a human body. And of course, the question is, what does it mean to be human in relationship to the earth? This is certainly the question that I have heard asked at this conference over the last few days. What does it mean to be human in relationship to the self? What does it mean to be human in relationship to each other? What does it mean to be human in relationship to the other? After delivering 250 babies, I'm informed by what I call the Fourfold Way of the midwife: heart, hands, patience, and knowledge. And I will take these in reverse order. Knowledge. Wally Villa reminded us that in North America we farm on stolen land. We farm on an agricultural legacy of stolen land, stolen labor, of genocide, enslavement, torture, and historical disregard for the fact that Black and brown hands have always and continue to grow and harvest our food. While in our most recent societal horror, we put the children of these people in cages at the border, separated, as this society has always done through the history of slavery and boarding schools from their parents. This is not new. And what I recognize from these past and ongoing traumas is that we have to learn not only to be conscious, but to stay conscious. What is the balance that we must seek between transcendence and immanence? The birth of the future human is a path of both individual and collective transformation. And this is one place, and I will go out on a limb in this crowd, where the wisdom of Black and brown peoples around the world takes the lead. The individual human progresses in a dance with the community. The I is free in the arms of the we. Patience. As biodynamic farmers and gardeners, we are taught, we cultivate a reverence for life, for the earth, for physical and cosmic beings on the earth. As biodynamic farmers and gardeners, we are healers of the earth. We are students and astute observers of what the land teaches us as we move about her. As biodynamic farmers and gardeners, we are attuned to and sensitive to the cosmos, to the universe, but we don't do the same for each other. In my daily experience of this society, I am forced to chronicle as recently as yesterday, and from members of this very extended family of biodynamics from the Waldorf community, in fact, a complete lack of reverence, healing, observation, attunement, or sensitivity to me or to my people in terms of both race and gender. And I find that breathtakingly sad. And I ask myself, how then do we cultivate healthy relationships with each other? Orland, thank you for reminding us that we are born into a body for a conscious experience, but also for the experience of the dynamics of inheritance and the wisdom of group consciousness. And that higher consciousness demands that we each align with our individual purpose, our reason for being here now, within the beauty and challenge of our group's purpose. I also believe when we name the group consciousness and collective wisdom of Indigenous, Black, and Brown peoples, we begin to comprehend the beauty of the development of the soul in the face of unspeakable violation to the human body. And unfortunately, when we name the group consciousness and collective inheritance of white heteropatriarchy and white supremacy, we see an obsession with hierarchy, with better than, and with power over, to the point of self and soul destruction. Hands. So let me say this quite clearly. White nationalism and white heteropatriarchy and supremacy are bullshit. There is only one race, the human race. Take it from me, the midwife, please, that we are all born naked, upside down, and backwards, and that is how we enter this world. But racism and sexism and the dire, dreadful consequences of these irrational hatreds are real. Claudia Rankine says that there is no mode of empathy that can replicate the daily strain of knowing that as a Black person, you can be killed simply for being Black. We have a shared experience of this room and this gathering of joy and celebration, yet we must also hold that as soon as Orland and Jim and I leave this hotel, our experience shifts. We go out into a world that sees us and treats us differently, dangerously so than how most of you are treated. Human freedom demands that we go back to, continually return to, this work of the embodied soul. People, we have to learn not just higher consciousness, we have to learn to stay conscious. That is what my 19-year-old students mean when they say, Professor Ford, I want to be woke. Woke, my friends, is a verb. Orland said, understanding racism does not mean it goes away. Thank you. And thank you, Stuart, for reminding me to talk about what we can do and not just about what all of this means. So here are 3 things that we can do as farmers and land stewards. And there are, of course, many more. Okay, let me catch up here. There we go. 1, decolonize your knowledge of agriculture and food system history in the United States and North America. Do you know that the CSA movement was not started at Temple Wilton Farm? Do you know what a bracero is? Homestead laws, black codes, Pickford versus the USDA, redlining, who started regenerative agriculture? Do you know that the indigenous communities who were here when the settlers arrived were more advanced in agriculture, architecture, medicine, and mathematics than the British, Spanish, Dutch, and Portuguese empires? Do you know that the value of forced uncompensated labor to US wealth is approximately $20.3 trillion, which would equal $565,000 for each African American alive in the United States today? 2, as biodynamic farmers, we believe wholesome food nourishes the human body and soul and is a basic human right. Do you know where your nearest areas of food apartheid are? Do you know what food apartheid is? Find out. Figure out how to subsidize your CSA boxes and food preparation instructions in culturally appropriate ways for your neighbors, including those families of the Black and brown people who are unjustly imprisoned. 3, find out who are the original inhabitants of your farmland. Acknowledge them. Set a place for their ancestors at your holiday tables. Consider reparations to Black and brown communities. It would take 228 years for the average Black family in the United States to reach the net wealth of an average white family in the United States. This is criminal, and it is no accident. It is by design. Wealth is land. Do something to change this. As we've already seen, there is a national voluntary reparations map. Get it? Same one. It's set up through the Soulfire Farm. And these are amazing stories. So, a young woman who's 30 years old, inherited wealth from her grandmother, did a little bit of research, found out that her family's wealth was built on slavery, went out, bought herself a $5 million property, and gave $1 million to a group of African American farmers who wanted to farm. They bought property right next to her and have started an intentional community. And that's just one example. Someone who went out, brought 25 acres of land and brought an additional 8 acres right next to that 25, and again gave it away to Black and brown farmers who were looking for land. We realize, as Leah Penniman says, that we cannot wait for the government to acknowledge that stolen wealth and land must be returned. And on this database, there is no middle person. You just go on and you contact the farmers directly, even if you're just giving a grant of $5,000 or $10,000. Heart. What is the future of this movement, and how do we help bring that into being? How can we best integrate social justice into the biodynamic movement? How can we best integrate social justice into the biodynamic movement? Well, by first integrating it into ourselves. Remember that social justice is not the new catch-all phrase for diversity and inclusion. Justice means recognizing that if you have grown accustomed to privilege, equality can sometimes feel like oppression. Justice means remembering that the comfort and blindness of privilege can be an unfortunate burden to the development of individual consciousness. Throw off that weight in the name of your human development. Recognize that we are in a particularly fraught moment, that the irrational hatreds and venomous words being spewed daily in our society are and always have been the slippery slope of human evil, depravity, and genocide. Take it from me, someone who is in the midst of the worst wars and atrocities of the late 20th century, the civil war in Guatemala, the Nicaraguan Contras, poverty in Bangladesh, the Cambodian Year Zero, the Rwandan genocide, South African apartheid, the Angolan Civil War, and yes, with my children, Black farmer Monica White says, history does not repeat itself, people repeat history. So together, I ask you, let us break these cycles. Do not be fooled by or underestimate the power of hatred generated by ugly words. Sean Vallée says, I get frustrated when I see my white colleagues overestimate the novelty of Trump-era inequities, since it reinforces my perception that they still vastly underestimate the breadth and depth of inequities before the rise of Trump.
Yes.
I ask you to have a heart full of courage for your task as an embodied soul and for your place in our larger community. Have a heart full of hope and faith. Be encouraged, as I was, that in the midst of the horror of the Tree of Life synagogue massacre, that the support and repair to the victims and their families is being led in part by 2 Muslim American organizations. Allies, woke people, the table is already set. Marginalized Indigenous, Black, and brown people, even the very same folks who have been traumatized by your people's foolishness, have always known that our liberation, our freedom is bound together with yours. You do not need to make a table of justice for us. We are sitting here. A place has been set for you. We are waiting, but this is a round table, and you will not come to sit at the head. Have a heart that gives birth to hope. Hope is the thing that makes us try, that makes us consciously evolve. It is what sustains long-term vision. Hope is about staying in the fight. It is about survival. How dare we have hope and strive for health in the face of the murderous hatreds of our day? How dare we have hope and strive for wellness in the face of societal and earth traumas? Why should we maintain hope in the face of intensely challenging, complex environmental and social problems? Barbara Kingsolver says, the arc of history is longer than human vision. It bends. We abolished slavery. We granted universal suffrage. We have done hard things before. And every time, it took a terrible fight between people who could not imagine changing the rules and those who said, we already did. We have made the world new. The hardest part will be to convince yourself of the possibilities and to hang on. If you run out of hope at the end of the day, to rise in the morning and put it on again with your shoes. Lin-Manuel Miranda, the brilliant creator and star of the award-winning play Hamilton, says, we rise and fall and light from dying embers, remembrances that hope and love last longer. And love is love, is love, is love, is love, is love, cannot be killed or swept aside. May you live a balanced and circular lifeway. Thank you so much.